Test, test. Recording test. Poopy butts. Big stinky monster farts. Okay. I think it's recording. So, I created this simple column out of some extrusions and stuff. You can view it in... Yes. Aha. Thank you everyone for being my fact-checking guys here. So if I have this column, I just made a series of extrusions, and you extrude up, you scale it down, you extrude up, you scale it down, you extrude up, you scale it up, so on and so forth. Not a difficult modeling task. But the problem is it still dumped everything to the default UVs, and we don't want that. And this is why you end up sort of having to do everything from scratch. But it's not that big of a deal. The first thing I did is I'm going to select all these faces. I'm in face mode right now in the UV editor, and I'm going to move them over here. And so basically this is my junk and workshop area. And as things get more correct, I'll move them back over here. Now I'm going to select this whole column and do a cylindrical unwrap just for this one. Actually, let me try normalizing these. Not normalizing. Unitizing. So let's do this with the grid now. And what unitize does is it dumps everything to a default square. So every single one of these faces now is mapped to the same square. This is an alternative to that idea of doing the cylindrical unwrap and then manually fixing it that we talked about previously. And right off the bat, you can see we can start to get something that might appear a bit columnar. So let's try making a quick little texture perhaps for this. So just with that selected, let's do this whole column as say a 512 by 512, and then I'm going to have different little chunks for each chunk of it. A chunk. So I'm going to use my slice tool. I like using the slice tool in Photoshop, which is hidden inside the crop tool. It's usually used for making slices for websites, but it's a nice way to get dividers, and oftentimes the ruler doesn't work as well. I'm just going to do this 2 by 2. And I'm going to say that perhaps this one, divide slice, just vertically into 2. And this sort of area right here represents one sort of divot. Rivet? Divot? What do these words even mean? I should Google it. Divot. What the heck is a divot? So I'm going to have this going. Is that Hedwig and the Angry Inch? Anyone see that movie?
Wait, what movie?
Hedwig and the Angry Inch. It's about a transgender rock star. It's dope.
It was a Broadway musical.
Yeah. Well, it was. I don't know what came first, the musical or the movie, but the music is.
Yeah, it was a movie, then there was a musical.
It's just the best. Apparently that was weird. What's Devo? Nothing.
In fact, her parents played it on Broadway.
Yeah. The movie just has some of the best music. I love it. So let's look up Greek. Who remembers 5th grade history? What the different types of column are? Huh? Not I. So basically we're going to have something like, you got these ones where it's straight up and down, but I might add this little nice architectural flourish of something coming up and down like that. And this is one of those modeling tasks that's so simple I might just do it by hand, or texturing tasks. This might just be a texture that goes from what to do. I'm going to grab this, I'm going to shrink my selection down. I hope you guys have realized, based on watching me, that actually you should learn to love playing around in Photoshop and not being so scared of trying new things. So select, modify. I'm going to smooth this to. We're starting to get a rounded idea, right? So if I copy and paste this, just do it straight through the FX layers, bevel and emboss. Oh my. Want this direction to be -90. You guys see what I'm doing here? And I'm going to cheat by adding a small outer glow just to create that highlight. And then maybe this is colored slightly different. Super dumb, super easy. And that's going to end up representing a giant stretch from the top to the bottom of this. So now, if I, in object mode, assign a new material of a blend, and I want to go to my material properties, right click material attributes, I'll select for my color a file node, and I'll select for that file node on the desktop that silly little column texture that I made. Turn off grid, and let's turn on texturing. And one thing that's happening is we are getting these harsh lines, and that's because the normals are hard. And sometimes we want that, and sometimes we don't. As this column rounds around, we actually want that to be a smooth transition, right? But we do want it to be sort of a harsh edge when it gets to these. So I will select edge mode, and just select the edges. That way we're not going to smooth these ones on the side. And go to normals, soften edge. And you'll see that that softened it on that end. You can go to object mode and check. So this is still a hard edge, but those ones aren't. I think there's a way. Yeah, you can, in the same way that you can select an edge loop by selecting one edge and shift double-clicking on its neighbor to determine the direction, you can do the same thing with an edge ring. So if I click on this with left-click, I can shift double-click to select this edge ring and get all of these around here. And same thing on these bottom ones. Shift, left-click to add selection, shift, double left-click to rotate around. I can do the same with all of these. Normals, soften edge. I'm sure this is quite confusing because what are we talking about when we look at this 3D object? Is it the polygons that matter? Is it the normals? Is it the texture? It's a combination of all of these. It's a combination of the lighting. And that sort of whole body spirit chakra of 3D animation is ever a higher task to find out. So now we got these, and now we got this. And I'll select these. Let's see if I can get it starting to look like a thing. How does it look in 3D? So now you're starting to see what I'm going for there, right? Doesn't look perfect, but it looks okay. It's a little dark. Marble is not that dark. Time for one of Professor B's rambling segues into nonsensical subjects. Let's let's talk about a favorite painter of mine, Lawrence Alma Tadema. It looks like it's spelled Tadema, but it's actually pronounced Tadema. And a lot of times people talk about how they like art, but they hate having to go out and have a Twitter account and have a portfolio and a LinkedIn. And you know what? Shut up. Go do it. And Lawrence Alma Tadema is my favorite example of a historic hero you should harken back to in your lineage of artists as somebody you should replicate. He was a painter, and he wanted to make money and get paid, right? And he changed his name from Lawrence Tadema to Lawrence Alma Tadema. His middle name was Alma, and he hyphenated it in, just so he would appear earlier in painting catalogs. And therefore, if you open it up and you have to buy a painting, you see him first, and then you buy it. This is later actually something that was, 100% not joking, a major factor in the culture of the iPhone game. The way that games came out on the iPhone was, man, this is really rambling. A game would come out, or they would launch all the games for the day or the week on the same day, and all the games for that day would be in alphabetical order. So the problem is, if they launched 15 games, and your game starts with T, you were screwed. But if it started with T and you were the only game launched that day, you were okay because you would appear on the first page of the new releases. This is why it's called Angry Birds. It's because they just wanted to have an A word, and therefore appear earliest on the iPhone screen. But so Lawrence Alma Tadema was a wondrous painter. He was one of the guys sort of on the cusp of photography, and sometimes you can sort of feel like he might be using a little photographic reference. But he was just considered one of the best painters of all time at marble. And I really love this stuff, and this art really spoke to rich gentrified yuppies in England who saw themselves as inheritors of the Greek tradition of middle class industrialism and leisure time. I don't know. So it just has this great sense of marble, contact shadows, how it gathers stains, how it does or does not absorb shadows. You'll notice the cast shadows are really light, but they're sharp because it's daytime. And I don't know. I just wanted you to see some of his pictures because he was very talented. This one's great. So that's Lawrence Alma Tadema as a segue from marble. And therefore we look at this and we're like, wow, this looks like shit. So we go over here. Don't hold yourself to the standard of my art. You should really hold yourself to the standard, as I hope to do as well, of way better artists out there in the world. So I might lighten this and colorize it. Color a little bit of warmth. Resave that ping. Such a bad workflow, saving to desktop, but these are just quick demos. Over here, that's a little better. Now this is something that highlights an interesting problem of where you have to make certain choices about texturing. With this tire, we were able to scale this infinitely, right? But with this tiny little marble column, we can't do the same thing because this only happens one time. So a lot of times, you're sort of determining what you want to use, which is either a texture atlas or a tiling texture. And a texture atlas is something where you put all of your texture assets on one giant file. You're making an environment, you know you're going to load all 15 of these trees, all 10 of these signposts, all these things that are not something that tiles infinitely, right? But they do have textures. And so by having them all on one giant texture, you can have one giant file call rather than having 15 for each of those individual trees. And just a quick Google search for texture atlas will hopefully do my teaching for me. Yeah. So like this is a great example. All these could be one image or a single image. Wait, one image or multiple images. That's better. There's a tutorial I'll post. Oh yeah, this is the overgrowth alpha texture atlases. It's how they like pack their characters together, and you can see there's sort of a huh? Yep. They use Blender.
Funny game.
They're Blender people.
Animal kung fu game.
Yeah. Cool stuff. Anyways, there's a tutorial I'll post from CG Textures, not CG Textures. CG Cookie that's pretty good about texture atlasing. And so the idea is something going to be repeating forever? So a lot of these are actually poor choices of using a texture atlas. Or is it going to be something like this where you put them on individual things? So this might be a problem of maybe it's such a small detail that maybe it's not deserving of a tiling texture. So in that case, maybe instead we would do something like just select it, and just manually make this something that fits a little more. Again, these are they're creative choices, and there's no right answer, except there are lots of wrong answers, and really the ultimate test is whether it worked or not. So let's go to material attributes, reload that. And now you can see now we have something that's a little more functional as a texture atlasing thingy, or a tileable, procedurally UV edited thingy. Alright, one last thing. I'm going to use the tire as my example for this. Two last things. First off, if you're confused about what should I do, just do it. Get an unwrap out, and bad unwraps are the way that you learn, and that might be something you have to do. The other thing I would say is, if that's too terrifying, learn from other people. Again, I hate to keep pitching the Blender community, but Blender, being free and open source, has lots of free and open source hippies who live in communes together, and they sing Kumbaya, and they put their files on the internet for anyone to download. And what's awesome about this is that means there's so many blend files here on BlendSwap that you can go find them and try and reverse engineer them to learn what they are. So, some of these aren't too bad. So if you're curious about how to unwrap something, maybe look at what you're looking for. I don't know. Column. So this is an example of a column you might download to find out how to unwrap it or even model it. And this one's a good example of maybe how to texture and paint something. This is a hand-painted column, and this looks great. So however this person unwraps something is probably an okay way to go. You do have to log in, but I really recommend using BlendSwap to reverse engineer stuff. And it's kind of scary to do, But all you have to do if you want to look at this in Maya instead of Blender is you bring it in and you open it and you have it selected. So that's all you have to do is right click on the thing you want selected, which will be a mesh object, and you go File, Export, FBX, Selected Objects Only, and then you could bring that FBX into Maya to see it in a program you're more comfortable with. So let's talk about this other thing, which is this tire. As we were looking, we had this sort of tire texture, this Photoshop document that we made, and now we still need a bump map and a reflectivity map. Well, later on in class, we're going to talk more about baking textures out of high poly objects, but I wanted to show some of the ideas behind what you can do just with image-based texturing. So we can take this image and save it out. Save as. Again, I'm going to save it as a ping because I'm so great with naming conventions. And I'll save it to this. And I want you to launch xnormal. If you don't have anything done yet, just grab any sort of image off the internet. It can be a photo of George Bush. It can be an anime landscape, anything you want. All we're looking at right now is how you can use a bitmap image to generate a normal map. That looks like a bad warning. Oh wait, this is not the mesh I wanted you to use. I wanted you to use Insanebump. No, Insanebump's not here. Okay everyone, time to install software on the school computers. If you Google Insanebump, does anyone know what CrazyBump is?
Yeah.
This is the free open source hippie college student project version of it. And it does basically the same thing. If you go to the second link on Blender Artist, it has a link to the final thing, which is a Google page. Sites.google.com, ccd, surgeon, download. And over here, there's this little arrow to download it. It's not the best website interface, but that will get you Insanebump. It's a very small program. There's lots and lots of programs out there doing this. I just saw something that, I don't know, I haven't tried it out yet, but there's like a website that does this now, where you you upload an image from your computer, and then it'll generate your normal maps on the internet. So you might not even have to install things anymore. I'll try and find that link and post it. So if you run Insanebump, it opens up this cool window, and occasionally this green light passes by. And this looks like a really 3D object, right? And all they did was they took this rock image and generated specular maps and ambient occlusion maps and normal maps from it. This is the beauty of the future, is you can just start with one diffuse texture and get very, very far. So I'm going to open a new texture, which is going to be up in the breadcrumbs. Under U, Users, Oscar Beckler, Desktop. There. I'm just going to copy and paste this. Oh. Desktop, there we are. Or is there? No. It's going to be the C drive. Desktop. Alright, hold on one sec. I want to dump that on the proper spot. Again, we're going off network stuff. So I'm getting my tire image. I'm going to copy it, paste it into. There we are. Reload it. And there it is, untitled2.png. So if I open that up, whoa, what is this? This is a normal map. Do people remember my normal map talk about how the little things go? So a normal is a perpendicular thing that goes out. All this does, all the normal map does is that instead of having that be on a per face basis of how much this perpendicular line goes this way or that way, instead it has it on a per pixel basis. And that's what these weird colors represent, is the R equals the x-axis. I'm going like this. The Y is the z-axis. Wait, that's not right. The G is the y-axis, and the B is the z-axis, which basically means, is it on this side of the face or on this side? We get some attributes that we can change, such as how detailed it is, blah, blah, blah. Changing this large bump density changes a lot of things. So if you change it to 1, I think it's like, you can get a really, really mealy texture. And if you make these numbers bigger, I think this just changed. I think large bump density just changes the strength. And large feature determines how soft or hard this is. You can say nice and hard, or if you want it more blurry and organic. Yeah, it doesn't do anything. And now we can save this texture. And I think it just saves it to the same place that the existing one was. Yeah. So wherever you had loaded that file, now we get these. And it did one for all of these. This is a specular map. This is a normal map. And here is a fake height map. And this is the initial one. And I actually wanted an ambient occlusion too. Maybe if I increase the height there. So now we have an ambient occlusion map. Did it save it though? Alright, I gotta look up how to get your ambient occlusion. So the cool thing about this is now we can hook these into Maya and see how they change things. And we're probably going to have to do a small amount of fiddling with it. So with this tire selected, alright, remember when I created that PSD network? Well, it has all these hooks up, folders already hooked up in there. So if we just dump those images in, it should function normally. Famous last words. So NR stands for normal, so I'll just dump this in into, I'll just hit enter, bring it up here. You'll notice one thing that sucks, which is this does have an effect, but it's very, very light. What happened is sometimes Crazy Bump, and I'm not sure, it's one of these settings like the strength, determines how strong this is based off of transparency. And so all I end up doing is just duplicating these a ton and merging them. Control E to merge in Photoshop. Is there a hotkey for duplicate layers? There. No. I think I have one.
Command J.
Command J.
Duplicating should duplicate.
Well, that doesn't look like a normal map at all. I'll try outputting this again. There we go. So this AO factor, the ambient occlusion factor, is the one that affects that. Again, you learn a lot just by grabbing switches and dragging them back and forth. You also waste a lot of time and oftentimes don't get very good results by doing that, but yeah, so now it's full opacity. So if I save that, we have our tire color and our tire bump. And let's see what that looks like. So in object mode, right click on our tire, material attributes, color, and now it has a normal map. But is it functioning correctly? Well, let's find out. First off, you might want to go I don't know why it's semi-transparent. It's starting to bug me. Now, if we go to the material attributes, one thing that happens is under the bump mapping, if we click on this, it goes to this node. And then if we click on this, it goes to this node. It's just to do that again. Material attributes. The bump map goes directly to the map, but there is actually an input below that, which is what kind of bump do we want to use. And again, going back to rendering editors, hypershade. If I grab this tire material and graph it, you can see everything. It's this extra node I mentioned right here, and now it's a little easier to select. The problem here is it's using bump, and we want to change this to tangent space normals. This is just a small thing that you have to do every time. Do not let it mess you up. And now you'll notice that the normal map works differently. There's with bump. This is with tangent space normals. I still don't know why it's showing the underside of that. It's starting to really bug me. Why does it have a transparency node? I'm going to check this in the hypergraph. This is getting advanced, but maybe it's a lesson in why you should fear Maya. If I graph this this material, we can see all the different connections, and I bet I can spot where I'm getting that transparency that's bugging me so. If I hover over this, you'll notice PSD tire color is going to tire transparency. I do not want that to be the case. I don't know why it has a transparency layer when I didn't include that, but I can just break that channel, that connection now. So I want to go out color to tire color, but not transparency. So I'll just delete that after clicking to select that connection. And now over here I can remake it. I middle mouse click on this arrow to get this. And I want, what was it? This might be better done with the connection editor. Again, this is actually why I kind of wish we were learning a different software than Maya. which is all these things like the hypershade and the connection editor, are actually very, very powerful. It's just not very useful when you're a beginner. The connection editor is a way to see all these various things. So here we can load this as the input on our connection editor. And over here, I'll select this tire node and reload right to make it the output. Now under out transparency, if I click it on my input, I can deselect it on my input, and now it's not there. Again, you can hook anything into anything with Maya, and that's really, really, really cool. Except when you're new and you don't know what any of this shit does. And hey, look at that, it's not transparent anymore. So the next thing we're going to do is add our specular map. And if I go back to my Photoshop document, this is over here under reflectivity. And I actually don't think it baked out what we want. If I drag in the specularity map, put it in the reflectivity, let's save this and look at what it does. Actually, before I save it out, I'm going to use Control L for levels. I'm going to crank these levels up so that it's very high contrast, right? So the tire treads are largely black. And the inner part is largely white. Now to see reflectivity, and to some extent to see normals, you actually have to have a light. You're trying to understand how these textures affect when a light passes over a surface. So I will create a light that we can test this with. And we'll just use directional light. And next up we have to turn off Maya's default lighting. We can click on this. Yep. Exactly so. Edit. Delete all by type history. Into the tile material. See how that little highlight looks very different now when it goes over this surface? Now I think because this is Maya, it actually is correct in that Maya as a default thinks of black as shiny and white as not shiny, which is dumb because everyone else does the opposite. So just so you know, whenever you output this, when you take this into Unity, you might want to say that the tire treads are where the dirt collects, but the outer part where it's nice and wet is not. So you would just invert this with Control I. Let's see this. If I invert this and save it. Oh my god, did it make that connection again? Oh Maya. But you can see how, I mean, you guys get the general idea, right? You can take bitmaps, turn them into other things, slice and dice them, and start loading them up. Alright. So we have about a half hour of class left. I would like to mostly just